Sprint is a mechanic that has existed for decades. You can trace its roots all the way back to some of the earliest platform games in the 80s, and it has become a staple in a wide variety of genres, particularly first-person shooters. For the majority of games, it's a given. It would be far more surprising to find out a game doesn't include sprint as a mechanic, as sprinting is a thing that people can actually do in the real world. As I've been told. It's not something you would expect to have much in the way of controversy for sure. The most notable zone of conflict is the Halo series, which did not have sprint as a mechanic until Halo Reach in 2010, where it split the fanbase on whether its inclusion added or detracted from the experience. While these arguments continue to this day, even to the most recent Halo game announcement, it seems like a small part to the now much larger debates around movement mechanics, which popped up in the 2010s. Sliding, diving, wall running, omni movement, there's dozens of new mechanics for people to argue over. But today, I'm not here to give sprint a pass. I'm here to make a case that this age-old mechanic has been quietly festering in the background. And as games have been refined over the years, this mechanic has become increasingly misused, leading to a mechanical crisis deep within the design of multiplayer games we all enjoy. Sprinting is pretty simple in concept. You move faster, and in turn it takes you slightly longer to react to stuff. It's a trade-off mechanic. Are you willing to sacrifice quicker aim for better movement? Do you attempt to reach a better position faster, knowing that if someone catches you out, you're pretty much doomed? It has a ton of gameplay implications that adds a lot of often unseen depth to our multiplayer matches. It's also an avenue for which gamers can be separated by skill. While this all seems pretty straightforward on the surface, the knock-on effects this generates are extensive, and the nature of sprint has changed and evolved since its original implementations many years ago. In practice, particularly for modern titles, sprint is only a trade-off if you let it be one. When people come to understand map layouts and when they're likely to run into an opponent, they can completely negate the disadvantage of sprinting, which stops it being a trade-off at all. Instead, not sprinting just becomes a disadvantage, which is something you can pretty clearly see in the Call of Duty series. This is a form of gameplay optimization, where typical gameplay trends towards the most effective outcomes. Which in and of itself is not the end of the world, but it does turn sprint into a form of required reading, raising the skill floor and making games less accessible at the ground level. Most games don't adhere to what could be described as realistic movement either. Concepts like momentum, weight, or believable agility are lax at best or flat out disregarded at worst. It's obviously not a requirement for movement to be realistic to also be good, but as a result of this freedom, players are able to push mechanics afforded by sprint to extreme degrees. The difference between someone who just uses sprint to get from A to B and someone who uses sprint in everything are astronomical. Players will utilize movement to better optimize their offensive and defensive actions, and if a game doesn't properly balance things out, it can make contending with it incredibly frustrating instead of engaging. There's a very fine line between what feels like being outplayed and what feels like being cheated. While stuff like this is a goldmine for competitive games, if you spend enough time online, you're bound to run into clips on casual games that just leave a bad taste in your mouth. And it's not really the player's fault for using what the game gave them. Some would describe this as just a skill issue and leave it at that, but it would be wrong to dismiss the ramifications of a mechanic out of hand. Games, particularly those that have been developed by large companies, such as Call of Duty and Battlefield, have been continually optimized over the years in every department. What were once games played at 720p and 30 frames per second are now games that can easily push beyond 4K and hundreds of frames per second. Not usually at the same time, but my point stands. The in-game UI is optimized to maximize your engagement time, and the store is socially engineered to have the highest chance of getting you to spend money. What's most important for our conversation today is that even the mechanics have been refined to a razor's edge. You only need to compare the pace of a modern Call of Duty title to one of its predecessors to see the progression. Optimization has its benefits, but it's a misconception to consider any type of optimization as a net benefit for everyone. To give an example, social media algorithms optimize for engagement, which is great for the platform as it keeps you watching. But this favors more stimulating and extreme content, which can damage your attention span and general mental well-being, and even incite radicalization in many forms. What optimization in gaming does is close the viable window of effective playstyles. The more optimally you play, the fewer weaknesses you have, which is great for you because you lose less frequently and in less stupid ways. But for everyone else, they are forced, in greater intensity, to chase results-driven methods of play, which might not be what they want to do. It should be mentioned, as it's often missed with stuff like this, is that there's zero blame that can be placed on an individual for just playing well. It's not your responsibility to make games enjoyable for everybody else, and as long as you're not actively cheating or breaking rules, you should be able to play as effectively or ineffectively as you want. It's the responsibility of the people making the games to design mechanics that are fun and accessible to their target audience. This is where the real problem lies. Games frequently miss the mark on implementing mechanics, such as sprint. While it's hard to say exactly why the recent Battlefield release, Battlefield 6, has succeeded as much as it has, I would personally attribute it to two things: aesthetics and mechanics. The thing this game does very well, when you compare it to the previous entry, 2042, is that it made the game much more mechanically accommodating towards a general audience. Typical engagement distances have been reduced, weapon bloom has increased, and sprint has been toned back. It's much easier to track people in terms of aiming, also in terms of predicting where they will be if they fall out of view, and even just being able to see them in the first place. This might be conjecture, but I find that in Battlefield 6, even when I'm having a really bad game, I'm still able to get results. But in 2042, I would be lucky to get a single kill. And I think that originates from how differently these games treat their movement and space. If Battlefield shows the benefits of restraint, Halo shows the risk of overreach. On the other side of the aisle, the reason that the most recent Halo Campaign Evolved reveal caused so much debate and controversy online was the inclusion of sprint in a game that would otherwise not have it. The original Combat Evolved is a much beloved classic, and many gamers view the lack of sprint as important to the pace and tone that the game establishes. Including sprint, to some, undermines the design ethos of the original, which ultimately makes it a worse game to play, not just mechanically speaking. As we've already touched on, a common complaint regarding sprint is to do with game pacing. As sprint has been refined, the general pace that multiplayer shooters are played at has increased. More recent Call of Duty titles move at a breakneck pace, and while the earlier iterations weren't exactly known for their slow, methodical gunplay, the general increase in speed is noticeable. This causes problems with accessibility, as to even break into the space as a beginner, it requires you to overcome an even larger set of mechanical hurdles to catch up. An increase in game pace also puts a larger cognitive load on players, which makes it harder to play for extended periods. It's the same story as to why gamers switch to slower paced games as they age. You have a certain tolerance for intensity that changes depending on your age and temperament. As a 26-year-old, I can still enjoy a lot of the same types of games I used to, but I don't have the level of tolerance that I had at 18. In my teens, I was able to play ranked competitive for 8 hours a day. But even playing a few matches of Call of Duty for this video proved to be pretty strenuous. Oh man. Are we winning? I have no idea. I feel like we're winning. Yeah, we are winning. Okay. If you want a game to be played by the widest variety of people possible, raising the pace of games will likely do the opposite. Another problem with Sprint is how it favours run and gun playstyles, which rewards mechanical refinement and an ever-increasing game speed over other forms of behaviour, such as decision making and map knowledge. It's not inherently bad. Faster action can be very fluid and rewarding, but it comes at the cost of reduced strategic diversity. Once a game starts to set an intense baseline, the gameplay rhythm becomes less varied and more homogeneous. I suppose it largely depends what you want out of your games to begin with, but personally I would like some leeway. For a lot of people, Sprint is a complete non-issue. It would be disingenuous to suggest that the arguments against Sprint have much in the way of hard data to back them up. While I was able to find some information that suggests that higher cognitive load makes gamers more aggressive, there's no direct study to compare the effects of player enjoyment to Sprint mechanics, partly because you would need a large games company to run said test and also release the findings to the public, and partly because Sprint is now a small part of the much larger debate around movement mechanics in games. As we hinted earlier, the conversation has moved even further beyond sprinting, and now features mechanics and concepts that didn't even exist when these debates first started. For a lot of people, being able to run fast in any game is just a given, and there's much bigger fish to fry. However you cut it, Sprint itself is a mechanic that is here to stay in some form. What the arguments you see online are really about are how to properly tune it for individual games. People want different things for different reasons, and the right answer is largely subjective. Some players want high intensity, mechanically rewarding gameplay, others want a more measured approach that rewards decision making. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and the constant tug-of-war that's going on for game mechanics is evidence of that. Gaming spent the best part of a decade in a culture of competitiveness, and the cracks are starting to show not just on the player side, but the developer side as well. More games will almost definitely follow the example set by Battlefield 6 in the coming years, but to what extent is anyone's guess. What is almost certain is that we will see a much wider range of movement systems in the coming years, especially in the AAA scene. All I hope though is that at the end of it all, the games are fun to play. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What games do you think strike the balance just right? Until next time, thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe.